Hello and welcome to Political Insider. I'm your host, Zac Anderson, the political editor at the Herald-Tribune. This is a new show that we're launching to explore state, local, and national politics. I'm going to be interviewing a range of guests who can offer their insight on the current political scene. I hope you continue to tune in week after week. I think you'll find it worthwhile. My first guest is New College of Florida political science professor Frank Alcock, somebody who I've interviewed many times and who I hope to have on the show many times. Professor, thank you for being the first guest on the new show.
Oh, it's an honor. Thanks, Zac, for having me here.
Well, let's jump right into it. The big political news this week was Donald Trump's statement about banning all Muslims from coming into the U.S. Obviously, very controversial. It was condemned on both sides by Republicans and Democrats. People said that it sounds like religious discrimination. Trump attracted a huge crowd here in Sarasota when he appeared recently, an estimated 8,000 to 12,000 people. A lot of those people told me that they like the fact that he's willing to go places that other candidates aren't. Do you think this ends up hurting him with his supporters?
I don't think it will. We're learning as much about Trump's base of support as we are about Trump during this cycle, and it's a little scary and it's surprising at times, but it's gotten to the point where I just don't see him going too far in terms of there being a backlash and a melt of some of the support because of something that he says that the rest of the world views to be outrageous. It seems that only bolsters his allure in the base of support that he has. And so I don't think this is going to hurt his numbers all that much. The only thing I think that you might see hurt Trump is if he became un-Trump somehow and you saw like a doubt or a lack of confidence, a lack of bravado. But I don't think these latest comments about closing the borders to Muslims are going to hurt him.
Okay. So we have
his support in terms of,
Sure. So we have a big GOP debate coming up next week. These have been kind of blockbuster television, must-view TV. It seems like Trump is probably going to be at the center of this again with his latest comments. In the past, it seems like some of these candidates have been a little bit reluctant to go after him too forcefully because he's a pretty effective counterpuncher. What do you see happening in this debate? Do you think this latest comment could provide an opportunity for them to try and gang up and take him down?
I do. I think we're going to see some fireworks next week. I think they have to go after him, not only for their own campaigns, but perhaps more so to protect the image of the party. As I had said on the last question, I don't think this is you're going to see a drop in his numbers in terms of this is going to hurt him with his support base, but I think it's a broader concern for the party as a whole, more than their prospects in the presidential election, all the way down the ticket. And so there's lots of concern in the Republican ranks, and so I think the rest of the field, with possibly one exception, I think will be going after Trump hard. Whether or not they're effective at throwing him off remains to be seen, but I think there'll be a lot of fireworks. The one exception, Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz's strategy is a little bit different. We might talk about him in a little bit, but he's drafting Trump, and so I think the more outrageous he gets, it's almost like a NASCAR analogy where somebody's just driving crazy and the smart guy is sort of just tailing him, drafting him, waiting for the crash. So.
And it's interesting, even though Trump's comments have been very controversial, he is addressing something that's on a lot of people's minds, and that's national security, especially in the wake of the terrorist attacks in Paris and San Bernardino. Obviously, this has become a pretty big issue. How much is this going to factor into the race going forward and into this debate next week, do you think?
It'll be very prominent. I'm not sure it's going to recede. So this might be one of the elections that even in 2016, I think the fires in Syria are still going to be burning. We're going to be talking about terrorism. There may be other incidents. We'd be fortunate if we can get from here now through a whole year without other incidents around the world. And in our own country. And so I think national security issues, terrorism will be a very prominent theme from here on through to the finish line. I think within the Republican Party, especially in this upcoming debate, the discussion is the fault lines of conflict are necessarily going to be a more or less aggressive posture with respect to a war on terror, but where that battle is going to be fought. So I think you're going to see some of the candidates sort of expressing their strength creds with measures in terms of tough measures a la Trump at home. Other candidates will be focusing on taking the fight over to ISIL in the Middle East and talking about ground troops and airstrikes and things like that.
Okay. Let's move on to some of the other candidates. Here in Florida, we'd like to keep a close eye on Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, two candidates who are longtime Floridians. Bush, the former governor, and Rubio, the Republican senator. They've had very divergent paths right now with their campaigns. Bush has been struggling. Rubio has been steadily climbing. Let's start with Rubio. He picked up 9 endorsements from members of Congress last month. He seems to be gaining some momentum in the polls, some big donors coming on board. How important are these endorsements to a campaign in this day and age? And what do you think about Rubio? Is he somebody who just seems to be steadily rising? Is there something that could trip him up?
He is steadily rising. The meaning, I think the endorsements, the significance varies. It's becoming less important over time. But I think at the last debate, especially with that exchange between Rubio and Bush, there was a passing, almost not even a passing of the torch, there was a seizure of the torch with respect to the most likely moderate or establishment candidate. I think Rubio is now probably the front runner. I think he's well positioned. I think his chances look reasonably good being in the final 3, if not winning the nomination. What could trip Rubio up? I think probably the biggest concern is just that his lane just remains crowded, that Jeb Bush doesn't go away, that Chris Christie or Kasich either outperform or perform above expectations in New Hampshire. And even though there's some coalescing of establishment support behind Rubio, it's not enough to get him past one of the base candidates, either Trump or Ted Cruz. Just in terms of his posture, he's young, and so the establishment might be able to say, this is another Obama-like candidate, and I think from the base they might tag him as not being a true believer, critique his positions on immigration and some other things. But I think he's well positioned. The one thing that might prevent him from winning again is just there is no coalescing among establishment support.
Sure. Now, you alluded to Bush taking a swing at Rubio and kind of missing in the last debate. That's kind of an allegory maybe for his entire campaign. He seems to have come out strong and then just sort of faded here. And there was an article recently, a report that showed that he had actually spent half of the money in his super PAC already, and that's kind of huge for his campaign, because he had really that was a big argument, that he had more money, had more support, that even though he wasn't doing well in the polls right now, he's going to be there in the end because he has all this money. Well, he's already spent half of the money in his super PAC. Right. He still has a pretty good advantage. I mean, he's still got more money than a lot of the other candidates, but he spent all this money. He hasn't really moved the polls. Do you still think that he has a shot of being there in the end and making a run once the people start voting?
I think he's pretty much done. It's not over, so I'm not saying it's impossible for a resurrection of his campaign. But there are a couple of problems. Although he raised an enormous amount of money early on, a lot of it is super PAC money. The super PAC money can go very, very quickly if you're using it for television ads. You and I were talking before about just the major difference in rates that are charged to super PACs relative to regular campaign spending. He just didn't see Trump. Who saw Trump coming? He didn't see Trump coming. That fundamentally changed the dynamics of the race. He got hit in the face by Trump out of the gate, and he just hasn't been able to recover. So while the money he has still can help to get a message out, I don't think he knows what message to get out. Nothing seems to be hurting Trump in terms of going negative. And if you get Trump out of the way, there's now a lot of other people there. So what do you do with that money? So it's a campaign in trouble.
Going to Florida for a minute here. This is 100 days last Sunday until the primary election on March 15th. So the election is coming up fairly quickly here. And if you look at when overseas ballots go out to the military, it's actually only 50 days away from when people start getting their ballots. So the election is approaching. Here in Florida, the polls also show Trump up over these home state favorites like Bush and Rubio. We've heard what you think of Bush's prospects. Obviously, Rubio maybe has a little bit better prospects at this point, but he's behind Trump in Florida as well. A lot of people think that if these two candidates don't win Florida, that they're definitely done, because they're basically expected to win this state, that they couldn't go forward after that. Is there a home state advantage anymore in the era of Trump and the media sensation that he is?
It's a great question. This cycle is maybe rethink that, and I think the home state advantage is really dissipating. Part of it's Trump, part of it's just the media environment that we live in, which is much different than it was 3-4 cycles ago, with social media, with internet, with cable TV news. I think in some respects, historically, the home field advantage was about name recognition, which is important early on. It's less important now just because of the immediate environment. And so where I think the home field advantage matters is if you have a candidate that has very high favorability numbers, high familiarity, and high favorability numbers in a particular state. Then it might be tough to knock that candidate off. I think Bush was just out of politics for too long, and I think Rubio, while he doesn't have a negative image among Republicans in the state, it's just not strong enough for them to give him any sort of advantage relative to the other candidates. So I don't think there's much of a home field advantage for these candidates, but if either Jeb Bush or Rubio does not serve in their home state, the narrative to that, it would just be very damaging. So I would agree. If they don't win here, they're in trouble.
And we're seeing that with John Kasich in Ohio, too. I mean, Trump is just dominating all these states right now. It doesn't seem to be much of an advantage. And you would agree that if Rubio or Bush, if neither of them wins Florida, that their campaigns are pretty much done?
It'd be a major blow. So I'd be surprised if they didn't win here, but then somehow were able to recover. So home location just doesn't matter as much anymore in terms of media. So somebody like Trump dominates the news wire everywhere.
Sure. Well, like I said, we have 100 days until the Florida primary, and we'll continue to watch it. That ends our show for today. We hope you continue to tune in next week and beyond. Thank you very much, Professor, for being here, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.